And joining us right now on Unpacking It is Dave Alpern, the president of Joe Gibbs Racing and author of the new book, Taking the Lead, Winning Business Principles That Fuel Joe Gibbs Racing. Check out the website, takingtheleadbook.com. It is available June 8th, but you can pre-order now. Dave, it's so great to have you on Unpacking It. How are you?
Hey, what's up, Bryce? I am doing great, and again, very grateful for you having me on. Thanks a lot. I've listened to your podcast, and when you asked me, I was like, hey, all right, that's why do you want to talk to me? I'm so used to people calling and asking for a coach, and then I'm like, hey, I wrote a book. Cool, I can do these things now.
Absolutely. Well, no, you've covered some awesome topics and a lot of topics that I personally identify with, and so
Yeah.
we're going to get into some of these principles and topics, but you and I share a love for one thing. Now, you're a Tar Heel, I'm a Duke guy, but we share the love for fantasy football. And so I want to start there because you've been playing. You got a few years on me. So how did you get into fantasy? And tell the listeners how long you've been playing.
That just means I'm old, for the record, that I've been doing it longer. But honestly, we've got a group of guys. We just had Fantasy Bowl 25, which I may or may not have won, but it's really not important. So we've been doing it for 25 years. And the crazy thing is, and I have three boys. I have 24-year-old twins. And so my wife was pregnant with them when we had our first draft. And the crazy thing was, back then, there was no websites. There were no fantasy magazines. I remember I had an NFL magazine that just had the rosters of all the teams. And I just drafted guys based on that. And we had to do our scoring on Monday from the USA Today. There were no websites, so you had to manually do your score. The USA Today was the official score that you used. And so it's a lot easier now with the websites and stuff, but it's legit. Like you have to be present. We've had drafts at FedEx Field in a box. We've had them, actually, literally, Dan Snyder walked in and interrupted one of ours because we were doing it when it was closed, and he was a part of it. It was awesome. And so these guys, there's 10 guys, and it's legit. Like, there are no bye weeks. Everyone's really into it. So it's we love it. We get so into it. It's a great way to connect with our buddies during the season. And I mean, there's massive trades every week, like first rounders going. I mean, it's a legit deal. And so it's a lot of fun. Again, I know people that don't do it think it's silly, but as a fellow fantasy guy, it's a way to connect with buddies. It makes every game matter, and it's just fun. It's just fun to compete with your buddies.
Absolutely. I'm in a league with my high school buddies. So we're pushing 20 years. We're getting close. I think it's year 18, maybe. So it's awesome. And I started right when kind of Yahoo was getting into fantasy. So I never experienced the go to the newspaper and do the stats. So that's remarkable. And I guess
that's old school.
One guy or multiple guys are tallying up the points. How did that?
We had a commissioner, and the commissioner's ruling kind of stood, but look, everybody knew exactly what your score was. You knew how to do it. We do some other leagues. We do a league here at the office, and actually a couple of our drivers, like Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, super into fantasy, very knowledgeable. One quick last fantasy story. I had one year I had done a trade with Kyle Busch on championship weekend being the actual NASCAR championship. Kyle won the championship. This is 2015 in victory lane. We're celebrating. There's confetti. There's the trophy. Kyle Busch comes up to me and says something about Charkandrick West, who was the backup running back for the Chiefs, who we had just traded, asking me how he had done in the game. And so, I mean, you talk about even the drivers get into it, and it's a lot of fun. It's a fun way to connect with the drivers too when we do some in-house fantasy stuff here. So it is a lot of fun.
That's a tremendous story. Yeah. And last thing, so you've been in the one league for 25 years. How many times have you won that league?
So I've been to 8 fantasy bowls and won 3. And again, I wish it were more. I wish my fantasy record. Only one guy's been to more fantasy bowls, so it's hard to get there. And so it is. There's a lot of bragging rights in that league. We have our equivalent of a green jacket. So there's a championship sweatshirt, a Patagonia, that you get when you win it, and you kind of add the years that you've won it. So there's a lot of pride in our league to win to have one of those jackets. So it's a lot of fun. How about you?
So I've won 2 rings in my main league. I got the championship rings right here in the studio.
Why Now, see, my best buddy Moose is our commissioner, and he makes rings for himself. Now, we get rings in fantasy, I'm sorry, in NASCAR. So I have a ring box, and I have drawn the line at making myself a ring. I do love that. Is actually pretty cool. True story. Moose wears that ring, and people legit think he's an NFL player. Like they're like, "Hey, look, what Super Bowl were you in?" He's like, "Well, it might have been a fantasy championship." So anyway, that's awesome. That's good
cool
stuff.
Well, man, I could talk fantasy all day, but I want to get into your story and we'll talk about the book. But I think, and you explain the full story in the book, but encourage listeners to check out the book. But for those that may not be familiar with kind of your story on how you became the president of Joe Gibbs Racing, very intriguing because it started off in the t-shirt game. So early on, you've been with the organization for a long time from the beginning, and so share with our listeners how it all began.
Yeah, Bryce. Really, I was an unpaid intern out of college, and I had the opportunity to come down to Charlotte, and I talk about this story in more detail. But they had nowhere to put me, so they cleared out a broom closet. And I mean, everything from an elementary school desk, an extension cord, because there's no electrical outlets in a broom closet. And this is early 90s, so it's pre-internet. So, I mean, I have a spiral notebook, and it's not like I have a screen. And I had a phone with a big, long cord and no one to call. And that was my start. I mean, it was literally as unglamorous as you can imagine. I talk a lot in the book about being, I had two sisters. I was the only son, and I was trying to, make my dad proud of me. My dad was a uber high achiever. And, all I could think of was here I am in a garage working in a broom closet for nothing. Boy, he must be proud of me. So it was a very inauspicious start. And I was doing things like booking hotel rooms. And, I tell students now, try to book a hotel room with no internet. Everything was more difficult back then. And the true story, my first project, like I really wanted to make myself valuable. And there's a section in the book called Delivering More Than You Cost. And it's talking about how do you make yourself indispensable at your company? And the way you do that is by deliver more value than you're paid. And so I was trying to think of how can I do that? And as an unpaid intern, it was a pretty low bar. So I was trying to figure out how can I earn my keep around here? And one of the things that I kind of thought of early on was, hey, coach is really popular. He was still coaching in Washington the first little bit when we were as a race team. So I thought, what if we were to make t-shirts that said Joe Gibbs Racing, this new little team that he started up, and could sell them in RFK Stadium, which at the time was where Washington played football. So again, with no internet, I figured out how do you go screen print a t-shirt, figured out the name of the buyer at RFK, and I went and got a meeting. I said, hey, I'm calling on behalf of Joe Gibbs. I was no dummy. I knew that was going to get me in the door. And I honestly, I made generic JGR t-shirts and I sold them to the guy on consignment. I was like, look, we'll do a kiosk. If they don't sell, I'll take them back. I didn't clear that with JGR first, but I knew they would sell. And the funny thing is I went in and I tell the story in the book about it. I go in to meet with this guy and he goes, get me a PO and we'll do an order. And of course I shake his hand, I leave and I'm like, what the heck is a PO? It's a purchase order, but I had no idea what he was talking about. And I couldn't Google it. So I had to ask somebody. So I made 72 t-shirts, brought them, set them up, and they sold out. And interestingly, that launched my career as, quote, the t-shirt guy. That was kind of what everyone called me. And so I started doing all the merchandise for our NASCAR team. So t-shirts, hats, toys, trinkets. And that was really more than a decade of my career was I wanted to be an expert in t-shirts or whatever, but nobody asked me to do it. It was just kind of it was one of those things where I was like, I got to earn my keep around here because I really like it and I would like them to keep me. So I would come up with different projects, but yeah, the t-shirt one is kind of the one that really, I would say, put me on the map. And for many years, I was the t-shirt guy.
I love it. And now you're the president of a team and an organization that has 500 employees.
Yeah.
And so it really is a remarkable story for you to see where you started and then to see where your career has gone, but then also JGR to see, here's a Super Bowl winning coach who goes into NASCAR and to get to this level of success. And so I guess at what point did you realize that, okay, this is going to work for you personally, but also the fact that All right, this Joe Gibbs racing team is onto something here.
Yeah, well, interestingly, so you're exactly right. So Joe got into it just at the right time. We had 15 employees. We were in this little garage, and I think we all thought this is how it's going to look forever. And what's been interesting is we've seen NASCAR from every single stage. We saw it as a little 15-person, one-car team. Then we grew to having 2 cars, then 3, then 4. So in NASCAR, it's a little different. Every week, 40 cars compete against each other. And of those 40, 4 of them belong to us. So I compare it to kids. It's like having your kids all competing in an event against each other every week. It's very unique in that we actually field 4 teams that compete against each other every week. But and the limit is 4. So we are as large as you can get as an organization, because we have the maximum 4 Cup Series teams. And so we've seen it though from every stage. And yeah, no, I think early on, we won the Daytona 500 in our second season. And I think that was when we kind of went, this may work out. We just won the biggest race, and we had one team. And as we grew, it became evident. And honestly, you could see God's hand in what happened, because it really was miraculous. Like it took us until 99 to win our first championship. And in 1999, Bobby Labonte won. And honestly, I remember we were sitting in the Waldorf Astoria where we had our banquet, and we were looking around, and here's Roger Penske and Rick Hendrick and these icons of business, these racing legends. And we're like, we won. This is legitimately a miracle. I mean, we have no idea what we're doing, And so I think you could see at each sort of stage, sort of God's hand taking care of us. And, you try to do things wisely, but with a lot of prayer. Ultimately, it still came down to, you can have all the preparation you want, and God's either in it or he's not. And so fortunately, we were able to be successful. And I think for me, I talk a lot about in the book, having years and years of, I write in a journal, and years of, there were many times where I felt frustrated. I felt like, hey, I'm not being utilized. I'm not really appreciated. Am I going to be the t-shirt guy forever? I would kind of wallow in my, hey, God, didn't you make me for so much more than this? And yet here I am, everybody just thinks of me as the t-shirt guy, and I have so much more to offer. And it wasn't until, sometimes you lose sight of, be great right where you are, be great at the small things before you think you're going to get entrusted with bigger things. And so there were a lot of years where I didn't know if I even wanted to make it. I was like, maybe I need to go do something else, because I don't like making t-shirts or whatever it was, menial thing that I had for many of those first few years. And I think there were a lot of lessons, because what I ended up finding out, and we'll probably get to that, but God was really preparing me for something I never ever imagined. In other words, I was for 20 years being pruned and being prepared for a job that literally never existed, because keep in mind, I work for a family business and I'm not a member of the family. So it took actually a horrible tragedy to lead to my becoming president, which was kind of a story in and of itself. But all of those steps, often in life, our life really is, we're here to talk about my book, but our lives are all like a book, and we are in chapters that we don't like. Maybe it's a page we don't like, maybe it's a whole chapter. And we always just want to be able to flip to the end and go, God, just tell me how this is going to turn out. And usually when we get to later chapters, we look back and we go, now I get it. But many of those early years, Bryce, I just didn't know. I didn't know how long I was going to be there, or, again, I loved the place. And I often say the who to me is more important than the what. We could have been selling coat hangers and it wouldn't have mattered. I loved who I was doing it with. I loved Coach Gibbs was a mentor. JD Gibbs, his son, was my best friend. These were godly men who were examples to me. The fact that we weren't selling coat hangers was a good thing, because we were actually doing something pretty cool in NASCAR. But often we get caught up in the what, and we lose sight of, the people and sort of our why and all that other stuff. So that's a long way of saying, I think at every stage, I kind of knew the race team was going to make it. I didn't always know what my role was going to be in it, because a lot of times it just didn't feel like I was I might do something really well, but it wasn't getting me anywhere in my estimation early on.
Well, it's an incredible story, and what I find just so fascinating and interesting is the fact that okay, you're not a member of the Gibbs
Yeah.
family, yet you are so intertwined. Your story is so intertwined with them, and also from a spiritual standpoint as well.
Right.
So what can you share as far as the journey of faith that you've been on, and the role that both JD and Coach Gibbs played in your
Yeah.
development and understanding of who Jesus is?
Well, yeah, actually, I was a non-churched kid growing up. Um, Actually, my father was Jewish, but we celebrated Christmas. We didn't go to church. I really had no church background. I was exposed to the gospel in high school through Young Life, which is a very dear ministry that I'm still involved in, and my whole family is. All my boys have been leaders, and um,
Me too.
interestingly, in high school, believe it or not, the Young Life meetings were at Joe Gibbs's house. So here we are in the 80s in the DC area, and Coach was having Young Life at his house. And so JD Gibbs, Joe's oldest son, was ended up being my best friend. But JD in high school was quarterback of the football team, kind of the all-American great kid. But JD recognized early the power of influence, and I was one of those kids that JD impacted, and JD was my picture. So I started going to Young Life, again, who wouldn't go to a meeting at Coach Gibbs's house? And I was one of those skeptical kids that, it was over a year of me thinking, they're trying to brainwash us. I had a lot of apologetics questions. This just doesn't make sense. This resurrection stuff sounds crazy. And all the time while they were speaking, the leaders, my Young Life leaders, Rick and John, they'd be sharing these messages. And what kept registering with me was I always knew there was something about JD that was different, but the more they would talk, the more I would go, that's what it is about JD. JD was my picture of what they were talking about, what it looked like in a high school kid. And so for every stage of my career, JD, I eventually, met the Lord my senior year, and JD and I became best friends through college. And then interestingly, he asked me to come help, which I talk about that in the book. Just the fact that JD asked me among all of his other friends was this stamp of confidence that I lacked in myself, that hey, JD picked me for a reason. Why did he pick me? And so, but through each stage in life, JD kind of was really a peer that was a picture to me of what it looked like to be a follower of Christ in business, as a dad, as a friend, as a worker, just all those different things. And so it was just a very unique relationship. And then meanwhile, his dad was kind of a idol of mine, and set the tone early on with, I'm spoiled because this is the only job I've ever had. And so I've never been to another company that doesn't pray every Monday morning, to start off our week, which we do. And that time was sacred. And so I had these pictures. I was very spoiled of what it looked like. And so all the while, they sort of let me into their family. And again, all the while, I was being prepared for something. And, JD got sick in about 2014. And about a year into it, he was unable to kind of perform the duties anymore of president. And that's when the, coach came to me and just said, listen, you're the only one that can do this. And, that's when you kind of realize, oh my gosh, all of those different, I was the t-shirt guy, I was the PR person. I kind of did all the different front office jobs. And I was being groomed for this job in a family business. And I think one of the unique perspectives that I have, and why I probably was the only person that really was equipped in this way for this job, is I can approach every decision from the same perspective that JD did. And obviously JD, and think of things, how would JD handle this? And JD had a way of handling everything that was all anchored in his faith. And I really, I think I bring that here, because I kind of know if we have it used to be you had a crisis every week or two. Now there's 5 every day. And so JD had this unique, steady way of dealing with crisis, just prayerfully, reasonably, rationally. And so I really try to model that now. And having been so close to JD, that uniquely qualified me to to be able to kind of say, how do we keep the culture and things the way that JD had it. And again, it's different, and I'm certainly not JD, and I don't think the Lord would want me to be JD, but I think being able to honor that, and as much as I can do things the way I think JD would have wanted to, which ultimately, hopefully, are ways that honor the Lord. You know, that's kind of, I feel like, why I'm here. That's my purpose here.
Hey, amen. And what a tragic story with JD
Yeah.
and proceeds of this book, taking the lead
Yeah.
with Alpern, goes to the JD Gibbs Legacy Fund, which also supports Young Life, which you mentioned, and I'm a
Yeah.
product of Young Life myself. So,
oh, that's awesome. Where was that? Whereabouts? Where'd you go?
I grew up in Weddington, so I went to Weddington
Okay.
Young Life.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
and then I went to Crooked Creek as a student,
Yeah.
and then years later as a leader, I went back to Crooked Creek, and so I'm a big supporter of Young Life and absolutely love it. So,
well, that's awesome. And JD's Legacy Fund supports urban Young Life here at Charlotte at some of the under-resourced high schools, and so we're doing Young Life at West Charlotte and Harding and Vance and a number of those, and that was really where JD's heart was. And so we sort of served on that adult board when he was with us. He went to be with the Lord 2 years ago. But so there, it's sort of a full circle thing. And so when I wrote this book, I didn't, it just felt like the right thing to do, that my author proceeds would go to that. It's something that's near and dear to our family as well, and just really blessed to be a part of that. And JD really felt strongly that, we had a leader that walked into our lives, Rick Beckwith, and he just felt like every kid should have a Rick that walks into their life and communicates to them that, hey, you are valuable and fearfully and wonderfully made, and can just pour into their life on their turf and invest in them. And it shouldn't matter where you were born or what school you go to. We need to make sure we have the resources to have that for every school in the Charlotte area. And so that's really what I think that's what the fund is geared towards.
Oh, that's awesome. And I actually heard JD speak at a Young Life banquet years ago.
Really?
So one of the Charlotte banquets. So appreciate his heart
that's awesome.
for Young Life. And so again, the book is called Taking the Lead. So you'll be encouraged, you'll be inspired, and learn some great leadership tips and tools from Dave, and then also support the JD Gibbs Legacy Fund as well. And there's so much that I want to get to. But I want to be aware of your time. So
I'm good. They don't need me to make the cars go fast. If they do, we're in big trouble. So
that's right. We'll leave that to them then. Well, so I guess I almost want to take a step back, and you kind of mentioned why you wrote the book to a certain extent, but let's maybe unpack that further. Kind of why now, and why did you decide that these were the topics that you wanted to discuss, that these were the stories that you wanted to share with readers at this point in your career?
I'll try to not make this too much. Backing up, so 10 years ago, my father I'd mentioned, he actually worked for the CIA, had this really interesting job, spoke multiple languages. My dad started writing a book. He got sick with cancer, and I really urged my dad, hey, can we record you, in case you can't finish this? And ever the optimist, he said no. And my dad passed away and kind of deprived our family and future generations of his story. And so it was then 10 years ago that I told my wife, you know what, my story may not be as compelling as my dad's, but I really want to write it down. I want to document it. So I started a file on my phone called Book. And for the next decade, on airplanes, during my prayer time, whatever, something would come to me, I would just voice memo a principle, treat people like a soul, not a transaction. Or I would write down a story. Hey, don't forget about this story and how it applies. And so I just started accumulating, and it was, but again, my story at the time, I was still the t-shirt guy. It hadn't gone where it did now. And I think when JD got sick, just felt like I was learning a lot. And that's when I really got intentional. And it was about 3 years ago that I went and sought out a book publisher, and it was really had come together this, now that I was president, and really the theme that is woven throughout my book that I think actually makes it kind of different than a lot of other leadership books. most of the business leadership books that you read are written from the perspective of what I would call the type A alpha leader. And I work
Mm,
for one of them. I admire those people, that
mm,
alpha, we're going to, that coach. Mine is more of a theme of reluctant leadership. It's very different.
mm.
And I think that resonates with some people, particularly there are some men who feel like I'm supposed to be the alpha leader profile. And I think for me, it just looked very different. Again, I needed kind of, after lamenting in my journal for many years that I want more responsibility, all of a sudden God gave it to me. And I was like, I was just kidding. I don't want this. And
Yeah.
so I needed, some kicks in the pants to do it. And to some degree, I still do. I'm not comfortable. I mean, I love speaking and I love being in front of people, but I was much more comfortable as a chief of staff than I was, being a president. And so I think that's an important message for people. And so a lot of that is woven throughout the book, but it also has the perspective of, I mean, I work for one of the all-time alpha leaders, ever, and have probably been the closest to coach for literally 30 years, in business. And so I've seen behind the curtain from that perspective how successful business can be run. And he's in 2 Pro Sport Hall of Fames for a reason. And so you kind of there's this juxtaposition of me and him and our leadership styles and why they work well together. And so that was just important for me. And so many of the principles in there are both what I've learned from Coach and why he is so successful, mixed in with things that I learned from JD and sort of things that I've learned myself that are sometimes contrasting with that. And so, and really, I think my story hopefully will resonate with anyone. And whether you're a student, whether you're stuck in a job that you're not super excited about, because I've been there, whether you're just starting out and you don't even really know what you're going to do, whether you're maybe somewhere in the middle of your career, or whether you're an executive running a company, I think a lot of these principles apply to you in any of those stages, because I've sort of been a part of each one of those and seen them firsthand. And so hopefully a lot of that will resonate with a wide variety of people.
Well, I love that approach, and you're right. There are different kind of leaders, because we see this with coaches all the time. That not all the coaches are the same. They have the same
Right.
personality or the same philosophy or the same demeanor, and we see success
Yeah.
across the board in that way. So I appreciate your vantage point on that. That leaders
Yeah.
are different types in that regard. But the one common thing that I think, to your point about, we can resonate with, and you mentioned it already, that treating people as souls, not transactions. So that translates across the board. And then another thing that you said, business no different than life is built on relationships. And so this is something that I'm very passionate about. This is a core principle in how I operate and how I've kind of built Unpacking It. It's all about relationships. And so for you, how have you seen that play out, and what does that mean or look like in your life?
Yeah, so I mean, it couldn't be more true. We exist on sponsorship. We're unique in pro sports in that 75-80% of our revenue actually comes from corporate sponsors. We don't have a franchise model. We're very different. We have a saying that we have to hunt for everything we eat. And so as a result, an inordinate amount of our attention is placed on those corporate partners. And we have, in my opinion, some of the greatest brands in the world, Toyota, FedEx, Mars, Stanley Black and Decker, you go down the list. And so, and our average partner's been with us over a decade. And I think what that's a testament of isn't just that we're good at racing, it's that we have great relationships. And because what happens is you build trust with these people. And Joe says it all the time. This isn't business. This is relationships. And it means being intentional. It means, going to see them, spending time together, over delivering in everything. I talked earlier about delivering more than you cost. That doesn't just apply to us as people. That applies to us as companies. I mean, if you want to have a healthy company and keep your customers, deliver more than they're paying you, and you'll always have a good business. I mean, it's a very simple principle, but that starts with relationships, because we want to work with people we like. We want to work with people that we trust. And so we have to build that up. And, you're making deposits in people. And when you do treat people as souls, they recognize that. And and so I think that's the philosophy from the beginning. I mentioned that on Monday morning we have prayer meeting. We pray for our partners, the people that we work with. We're praying for them by name. Many of them are dealing with health issues, or they have things going on in their family. And we don't necessarily have to. We don't want to announce that we're doing that. We just do that because these are people we have relationships with, and so you become really attached to these people, and you genuinely care about them, and it in turn turns into a healthy business. I use this example all the time. We've won a lot of races. I love winning, obviously, at the racetrack, but I get way more enjoyment out of the reaction of our partners. So, I use this example. FedEx, they've won 3 of the last 5 Daytona 500s with Denny Hamlin. But when they won their first one, I'll never forget, there were a group of executives in the pits, and we won the race, and we were walking to victory lane, and these people were bawling, like they were crying. They don't probably cry at other sporting events, but in this, the reason our sport is different is because the sponsor actually is the identity of the team. So the FedEx car won the Daytona 500, their car. The lead story on SportsCenter was the FedEx car winning the Daytona 500. You can't buy that spot on SportsCenter as an advertiser, but you can if your logo's on the car that wins the 500. So, but right. All that to say, the relationship that I had with them made that, that gave us so much joy to say we are delivering value to them, and we're rewarding their trust in us with success. And that, when you don't have a relationship with somebody, that doesn't happen. But for us, it is their family. And so we desperately want to win for them. We desperately want their businesses to do well. And so, that starts with Coach. I mean, he's relentless, but he is relentless in his pursuit of relationships, and he's very intentional. He's always calling, folks, and again, he acts like they're his only customer or his only friend. And I've learned a lot about that. And so again, at the end of the day, whatever business you're in, you are in the relationship business. I don't care if you're sitting in a cubicle looking at spreadsheets all day. At the end of the day, it's still, relationships are a huge part of what you do and what we do every day, and how you view the people you work with. Like I said, again, a small example of soul versus transaction is when somebody's viewing you as a transaction, it's that, hey, how you doing? And they're looking over your shoulder at the next maybe more important person, or they clearly just want to get through the pleasantries to move on to, the more important thing that they have. You're sort of a cog in the wheel, as opposed to, every interaction. I always used to use as an example with JD, every interaction with me started with, how are you doing? How's your family doing? Or he'd ask me something about something that he knew was important to me. And that's more of a soul-based interaction versus just treating someone like a transaction to get to the next thing. And it's something that's intentional, that you've got to work towards, but it makes a huge, huge difference in life and business, really.
Well, and asking those questions and actually caring what the answer is versus just asking it to check it off to get to the transaction. So
for sure.
Yeah, no, you're right on. And yeah, what an important thing for us to just be aware of and think about. All right, let's wrap it up with this. And this is probably almost something that we could have led with, but this book is about principles of success. And when we hear about Joe Gibbs and we think about the Super Bowls and all the championships and the races won and just the growth of Joe Gibbs racing, this word success. And so maybe we think about it from a worldly perspective, and you talk about the principles that do help successful business and what that looks like. But I know, just having been loosely connected with Coach over the years, that he is about ministry. He is about changing lives. He does want to leave an eternal impact on people. And JD, that was his legacy as well. So this word success, it means a lot more when we talk about Joe Gibbs racing, doesn't it?
Well, and my encouragement to readers and to listeners of this is, really it is, there's sort of this myth that, if I could just get this title, or if I could just have this money. And one of the things that I learned from JD, and I talk about in the book, is that, let's talk specifically about your occupation. That is not your identity. And I can tell you, as someone who struggled with what my title was, and now I have this great title, it isn't my identity. It can't be my identity. And I need to fight to not make it my identity. There's so much more to me. There's so much more to you. And it's this idea of, why are we doing all this? And coach taught me early on, look, we're called to be great at what we do. So to relentlessly pursue winning and wanting to be the best race team is biblical. I mean, we nobody cares what you think if you stink. So be really good, first of all. But then the question is why? Someday all these trophies, all these championships are going to mean nothing. Nothing. When JD passed away, I had the privilege of speaking at his service. Not one person mentioned any accomplishment from work. Not one. So when we pass away, the wins, there's not going to be a scoreboard up there. The question is going to be, what did we do with it? What did we do? So for us, what are we doing with the platform that we have? Are we being disciplined with our giving? And again, I've watched Joe increase our giving even in lean years where we're giving to ministries around the world. We have a ministry inside the building. On any given day, there's a dozen small groups and Bible studies going on in different rooms around the building. They happen through Zoom for the last year, but for the most part, we're training up leaders within the company, much like Young Life, to lead their peers. We have full-time chaplains on property. So it's giving of our time, it's giving of our resources, it's living it out. And so even if you're, again, just starting out in your career and you're thinking, well, I don't have this platform. You do have a platform, and it may be smaller, and that's okay. You may be in a different stage of your life, but it's this idea that business is ministry. We are all in full-time ministry, not just pastors, not just people who work for Young Life. We are all in full-time ministry. And that's the perspective that we need to have. And what are we doing with it? And again, I have a different job than I had 20 years ago. And so I believe God has put me now in a sphere of influence that is just different. And now I have access to people that I didn't 20 years ago. So the big question for me is, what am I doing with that? Am I wasting it just to be self-serving and win more races or am I investing in those people, in the souls of the people that I'm dealing with every day and just caring about them? And am I being an example to the people who work for us of what a godly leader should look like? And I think that should be an encouragement for everybody, that whatever stage in your career, and again, it can be small things. It could be the coworker who works next to you, just sharing a word of encouragement. Whatever it is in your small way, is it signing up for a club or a group at your work and just volunteering and saying, hey, I want to serve. I want to give some of my time away. Whatever small way you can use your influence and your platform is ultimately, again, what I believe we're here for. And again, fortunately, God has given us a platform through this race team, but I think we're going to be judged not on ultimately how many races we won, but what did we do with it? What did we do with this platform we were given? Again, now we'd like to win a lot along the way, but again, it's like I said, if we never won a race and we ran last every time and we had stuff falling off our cars every week, I don't think anybody would really care. I don't think we'd have the money to give to ministries around the world that we do. All those things stem from first be great at what you do and then use that platform to do greater things.
Amen. Let's end it right there. And so the book is called Taking the Lead. He's Dave Alpern, the president of Joe Gibbs Racing, and you learn all about how to succeed with integrity and purpose, and some great stories and principles that will help you as a leader, regardless of the type of leader that you are. So thank you for writing this book, Dave, and thanks for sharing with our audience.
Bryce, I appreciate that. And if you check out takingtheleadbook.com, you can order it on any of your favorite retailer. And there's some real blessed to have some really cool, fun endorsements on there from some folks. And you can read those on takingtheleadbook.com.
So some awesome endorsements and people in NASCAR and the business world. And then Toby Mack, your boy Toby Mack.
Yeah. That's a whole nother story. Yeah, he grew up in Northern Virginia. Great dude. Funny quick story to end on. I mentioned my buddy Moose. He's my best friend. He was in the original DC Talk, went to Liberty with those guys. He was a little younger and he didn't pursue. He was like, yeah, you guys are a Christian rap group. You're not going to amount to anything. And he left. And so we've been harassing him for 25 years about that unwise decision that he made. But anyway, he's on their first album. It's pretty funny.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm a diehard DC Talk Toby Mack fan. So so cool to see his endorsement on your website. So
very grateful for that.
Again, it's takingtheleadbook.com. JGR.com. He's Dave Alpern, and we appreciate you being a part of Unpacking It today. This was fun.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. I appreciate what you're doing. Great ministry. And again, thanks a lot. Go JGR. Root for. I know you'll all be tuning into the race. We got Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., Christopher Bell. Pick one.
We'll go for them all. Finish 1 through 4.
Right.
Let's go.
Absolutely. Thanks.
There's
Thanks,
Dave Alpern. Join us here on Unpacking It.